Okay, this next video is something different. It's comedy related, but it's not a comedy reaction. It's comedy related in the sense that it's about Geroge Carlin, but it's not a comedy reaction because this is actually about some sort of, it's from a channel called, maybe it's called Weird History or something like that. And the title of this is How Geroge Carlin's 7 Words Caused a Landmark Supreme Court Decision. I don't remember anything about this. Now, that's not to say that once I start listening to this or watching it, that, you know, it won't spark a memory. It might, but I'm really curious to see what this is about. So let's just go ahead and jump into it because I'm clueless.
You probably know that ever since it was first performed in the 1970s, Geroge Carlin's 7 Words You Can Never Say on TV routine has been considered a stand-up comedy masterpiece.
Wouldn't you think it'd be normal if they didn't want you to say something to tell you what it is?
But you might not know that Carlin's bit kicked off a legal battle that is still taught in law schools to this very day.
I don't think I have ever seen that thing about 7 words. If I have, it was decades ago and I've completely forgotten it. Okay.
Today, we're going to take a look at how Geroge Carlin's 7 Dirty Words routine caused a landmark Supreme Court decision. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other pop culture taboo-related topics you would like to hear about. Okay? Shit, pit, fuck, cock, motherfucker, and tits. Let's do this. The 1950s and early 1960s were relatively conservative times.
Wait, let me go back there. Wait.
Tits. What? Let's do this.
He was arrested.
Why? The 1950s and early 1960s were relatively conservative times in America, even for comedians. Lenny Bruce, however, was a notable exception. As one of the first comics of the era to do obviously taboo material, Bruce was a hit in many quarters. However, he remained a controversial figure to much of the country, and he was arrested for public obscenity 5 times between 1961 and 1964. One of those arrests would change the course of a young Geroge Carlin's career. Carlin originally presented himself with a wholesome, clean-cut image and a soft, family-friendly act. However, in 1962, Carlin was arrested alongside Lenny Bruce. While Carlin himself was only detained for not carrying an ID, the intrusive experience and the effect it had on Bruce's career left an impression. Years later, Carlin would also recall feeling like a traitor who was entertaining the fathers and mothers of the people he actually sympathized and associated with. Subsequently, he began to grow out his hair and beard, and his comedy became edgier and more socially conscious. He resolved to push boundaries, just like Lenny Bruce.
I honestly only recognize the name Lenny Bruce. I don't think I have ever seen any of his performances or anything like that. So when he was arrested, what did they say? He was arrested for obscenity, Lenny Bruce, or something. Did he say bad words in public? I mean, I guess I should read up about him and find out more, but I can see why this shaped a lot of what Geroge Carlin thought.
He resolved to push boundaries, just like Lenny Bruce.
Okay.
Geroge Carlin's famous 7 Words You Can Never Say on Television routine was first developed and recorded in 1972.
And here's the list of words your dad and I don't ever want to hear you say.
Cursing was highly taboo, and the bit examined how it was possible simple words could be so harmful that audiences had to be protected from hearing them.
Boy, that's going to save me an ass kicking or two.
Those words, pit, sucker, motherfucker, and tits. It was an instant success. Crowds loved to hear Carlin do the routine, and he would continue to refine and perform it for decades to come.
Oh, wow.
In July of 1972, Carlin performed at Milwaukee's Summerfest. One of the routines he performed there was the 7 Words monologue, and after completing it, he was arrested for obscenity. Carlin would eventually be...
Oh my gosh. You mean you couldn't even say curse words in public? I guess I didn't realize that was a thing. I mean, I know that the government legislates all sorts of stupid stuff. And I know you can be arrested for walking around nude, right? That's obscenity. That's considered obscenity, I believe. Or maybe there's another word they use for it, another legal word. But I guess I didn't realize you could be arrested for saying curse words in public. Are you kidding me? Okay.
From there was the 7 words monologue, and after completing it, he was arrested for obscenity. Carlin would eventually beat the charges in court, with the judge ruling his language was indecent but not illegal. In a masterful act of trolling, Carlin would temporarily rename the bit the Milwaukee 7. He would later find it funny that he was hassled over saying the 7 words when his whole intention in the first place was to free people from being hassled over saying the words.
They're just the words we can't say all the time.
Well,
and see, the thing is, a lot of that is still happening today. Because there are certain words that are considered very taboo. You can't say them or the mob's going to descend on you and try to crucify you. It's really stupid. So, in a lot of ways, we really haven't come very far from that sort of backwards mentality, honestly. Yeah.
Hassled over saying the words.
They're just the words we can't say all the time.
While the trouble over the 7 words in Milwaukee may have passed, that wasn't the end of it. In 1973, John H. Douglas, a self-appointed media watchdog, heard the routine on the radio while he was driving his son home after visiting colleges. The station was WBAI, an affiliate of Pacifica Radio, and they had actually been airing the uncensored routine as part of an intellectual discussion about language taboos. Backed by his organization, Morality in Media, Douglas filed a complaint with the FCC and asked that Pacifica lose its license to broadcast. The FCC's investigation of the incident would last months. Finally, in 1975, Douglas's complaint was upheld, and Pacifica was issued a warning. Of particular concern to the commission was that the broadcast went out at 2 p.m., a time they believed many children would be listening. No sanctions or fines were imposed in the end, but the commission warned Pacifica that future complaints could potentially lead to the cancellation of their license. Pacifica, as you might imagine, wasn't happy having a threat like that hanging over their corporate head.
I can imagine.
So they sued the FCC in federal court.
I mean, honestly, I get the hesitation that people have with certain, with the language being used in a certain way and how it can influence kids and all this kind of stuff. But, I don't even mind things like if there's going to be a lot of explicit sort of maybe content in something, that there's some sort of little label attached, explicit content or whatever, so that you know what you're getting into. I get, I understand kind of both sides to this, but at the same time, it is the parents' responsibility to kind of try to, control their own little world. However, if it's playing in the middle of the day and you don't know and there's no warning given at all, how can you switch the channel? If you really don't want your kids to be talking this way or whatever, and there's this balance. There's like, well, it's just words. It's true. It's just words. And, we give them a lot of power when we make them taboo. On the flip side, I can get why some parents don't necessarily really want their kids to be dropping these words all over the place, because after a while, then there's also this thing I've heard about how people who curse are supposed to be so much more intelligent. I don't know about that. I'm not sure about that. But after a while, when you hear it all the time, it just kind of makes, it makes, so every once in a while, it's funny. If it's perfectly timed, if it seems appropriate given the context and whatever. But then after a while, when it's all over the place and that's all you hear, it gets to be really tiresome because it doesn't add any depth to whatever it is that's being said. And it kind of cheapens the language. It cheapens whatever the message is supposed to be. So it's kind of like, for me, words like this is kind of like moderation type of thing. But that's not to say that you have the right to police what other people are saying. And I'm not talking about in a broadcast setting. I'm just talking about in general. I don't like word police. I'm not a fan. But at the same time, I understand a parent, not wanting their kids to be throwing words around that they have really no concept of, or they're very vulgar or whatever. It's kind of I don't know. It's interesting that this ended up in the court, the Supreme Court.
The case, known as Federal Communications Commission versus Pacifica Foundation, was initially decided by the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit. In a 2-to-1 vote, the court ruled the FCC did not have the power to order Pacifica to stop broadcasting the 7 words routine. One of the judge's opinions stated that the time of the broadcast was irrelevant.
That's irrelevant.
Ultimately, the FCC's mandate was found to be unconstitutionally vague and overbroad. Despite the opinion of the court, the FCC maintained that it was their legal duty to stop inappropriate bits like Carlin's 7 words from going out over the airwaves. They appealed, and the case went before the Supreme Court.
Not their legal duty. They're just trying to be the morality police. And you see what happens when government entities try to be the morality police. Things go to shit. I don't think that was on his. Oh yeah, it was on his. That was on his list. Okay. Oh, I've said one of the 7 words. Okay.
Words from going out over the airwaves. They appealed, and the case went before the Supreme Court of the United States.
When? What year? Okay.
The issue before both the district and Supreme Court was about how to define the difference between indecency and obscenity, and whether the FCC had the power to censor either. Justice John Paul Stevens looked for guidance in a court decision from 1926, which discussed the idea that indecency may be a right thing in a wrong place, like a pig in the parlor instead of the barnyard. In the case of the 7 words, he believed that being accessible to children through broadcast media made it a public nuisance and therefore within the FCC's power to censor. In their own defense, Pacifica argued that the definitions proposed by the FCC were wildly overbroad and would prevent uncensored broadcast of great works of classical and contemporary literature, including even passages from the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Surely the justices wouldn't allow such an absurdity, would they?
Okay.
In 1978, by a vote of 5-4, the Supreme Court held that the FCC did have a limited power to regulate the content of broadcast media. It further held that the 7 words routine was well within those limits and the FCC was entitled to act. The majority opinion discussed how children listening would have no warning about the content of the broadcast, and the easy access to that broadcast meant that the First Amendment protection would be limited. The dissent called the majority misguided and pointed out that the decision could prevent revered works of art and literature from being broadcast merely because they contained a few 4-letter words. Nonetheless, the ruling remains law today.
Oh, I thought they were going to find. I thought they were going to find in favor of Pacifica. I thought that's what was going to happen. See, I don't know. If I studied this at all in any of my college classes, I don't remember it. So I don't remember. I mean, I know the FCC does sort of kind of police stuff like that. Yeah, that's the thing, about stuff like this and all of this. You give them a little bit of power to do something, and then they just, it's kind of like you give a mouse a cookie. They just then start to just take over more than what they really were intended to be policing. I'm conflicted about this, honestly.
Remains law today.
I mean, I'm conflicted about this as a parent. I mean, my kids are adults now, but as a parent, certainly, let's say, so I know like Larry Flint, he went to court, First Amendment and all that stuff, pornography and all that. So as a parent, when I had young kids, and even now, I wouldn't necessarily appreciate certain, I mean, whatever, they're adults, but still, as a parent of young children when they were young, if I had on regular TV and all of a sudden pornography showed up, that would be a problem for me. So it's not exactly the same. I know it's not exactly the same. It kind of ties into that. You want to try to keep your kids, maybe you just don't want them to be exposed to certain things at certain ages, So that's why I'm kind of conflicted about this whole thing. I'm very much a proponent of free speech, a supporter of that. I see way too much suppression of that going on these days, especially. And I find that quite troublesome. At the same time, I understand wanting to keep certain things kind of segmented away from, let's say, like the wider population, let's say broadcast TV or broadcast radio. Because sort of like a time and place type situation. Like, for example, the pig, the pig in the barnyard or the pig in the whatever room. Not necessarily appropriate for the pig to be in that particular place, but it is over there in the barnyard. So this is bringing up a lot of conflicting thoughts in my head.
Words. Nonetheless, the ruling remains law today.
Oh, but I know something I was getting ready to say when they were talking about the different works of art. Another thing I don't really appreciate that's going on is this tendency to go back to works of literature, let's say, or even movies and shows or whatever from way back when the mindset of people was quite different, the culture was quite different. I don't really like this prickly tendency that a lot of people have today to either, let's say, get rid of things like that because it might cause all this offense, or do something like add these disclaimers. Well, this was in a time when thoughts were different, and so I don't like this tendency that's happening these days to apply our thought process of today to 50 or 100 years ago, because what was going on in their lives was quite different. So people thought differently about a lot of things. And I feel like when you try to suppress that or hide that, I don't think you're doing, well, I think it's a disservice, honestly, to just people in general and to the original works. I think that we are trying to baby and coddle society too much and protect them from things that might possibly offend them. As William Shatner called, today's generation outrage or something like that. And I think it's just a big mistake to be catering to this outrage that people have about stuff. And I wish we would just hurry up and wake the heck up when it comes to that. And that most people would just start to refuse putting up with that sort of thing, because it's silly. It makes no sense at all. Okay. Here we go.
The Supreme Court's decision in FCC versus Pacifica was controversial when it was made and remains so today. Prominent First Amendment attorney Floyd Abrams called the decision wrong-headed, and during a similar case in 2012, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg argued that the opinion was wrong when it was issued. She asked the rest of the court to reconsider the Pacifica case, pointing out that time and technology had altered the media landscape so much that the original ruling was untenable anyway. Despite the fact that Carlin's 7 words routine was the spark that ignited the case of FCC versus Pacifica, George himself wasn't a party to the litigation and had no stake in the case. In fact, he had no participation at all. He wasn't even called to testify on behalf of Pacifica. Legally speaking, the FCC wasn't after Carlin and generally had no objections to his material. Their wrath was aimed solely at Pacifica for playing the 7 words routine during daytime hours. Same for the original plaintiff, John Douglas, who went on record saying he had no objections to the 7 words routine for private use. While Carlin disagreed with the Supreme Court's decision, he didn't take it too hard. In fact, he actually found the whole thing pretty amusing. Decades later, he would reflect on the fact that the case was still being taught in law schools and say that he took a perverse pride in being a footnote to the judicial history of the United States.
So that's what I love, is that gotcha moment when you catch the culture with its pants down.
Media watchdog John H. Douglas, for his part, would insist that he was after Pacifica, not Carlin. He even admitted that he laughed out loud at the 7 words bit when he heard it.
Oh.
Pacifica and the 7 words may have lost the legal battle, but they won the cultural war. The legal fallout from the bit made the routine a high-profile symbol in the struggle to loosen taboos about so-called naughty words and bring an end to the kind of legal persecution that destroyed Carlin's idol, Lenny Bruce. In 2011, a study found that 47% of Facebook profiles contained profanity, and between 2005 and 2010, the use of such language on television increased a whopping 69%. Today, television offers incredibly explicit forms of entertainment.
Should I tell you when I plan to take a tomorrow, or there'll be none of your business?
Streaming internet services like Netflix are even less regulated. These realities mean that while broadcast TV and radio still face strict FCC oversight, such regulatory schemes are rapidly becoming pointless. On June 22, 2008, Geroge Carlin died of heart failure at St. John's Hospital Center in Santa Monica, California. His obituary in the New York Times called him an heir of Lenny Bruce, who gave voice to an indignant counterculture and assaulted the barricades of censorship on behalf of a generation of comics that followed him. It also specifically cited the 7 words you can never say on television routine, and called it one of the many ways he took aim at what he thought of as the palliating and obfuscating agents of American life. Politicians, advertisements, religion, the media, and conventional thinking of all stripes.
Cursing, cussing, swearing. All I could think of was shit, motherfucking tits, man.
Carlin was so ahead of his time that even a decade after his death, his comedy still held up. In
Yeah.
2017, Rolling Stone magazine called him an MIT-level linguist, a First Amendment activist, and the undisputed champion gadfly of stand-up. They named him the second-best stand-up comic of all time, behind only Richard Pryor, a man who considered Carlin one of his biggest influences. And he wasn't the only one. Some of the comics that claim Carlin as an influence include Chris Rock, Jon Stewart, Bill Burr, and Bill Hicks. So what do you think? Are you a fan of Mr. Carlin? Speak up, you silly motherfucker. Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our week.
Okay. I don't want it to do... This was not... Yeah, no, this is still on my playlist. So, yeah, Bill Hicks has been recommended to me, but I haven't watched any of his stuff yet. I've got some stuff of his in my to-watch list. I can see Carlin in Bill Burr, and maybe that's part of the reason why I like Bill Burr so much. I'm trying to go back and see. Okay, there we go. I haven't watched any of Jon Stewart for my channel yet, but I did not long ago do the Chris Rock one. But yeah, you know, I've said this before, I think. If I haven't said it in my videos, I said it at least in a comment or something, how Geroge Carlin, if he were alive today, I don't think he would have the patience for the idiocy that is going on in society in general. I mean, it just feels like we have just sunk so far. It's crazy. And, you know, I've mentioned before how it as far as things like freedom of speech and stuff like that, even comedians are feeling the pressure to try to rein in because of outrage culture, the outrage generation outrage. And I think that's you know, it's a crying shame. And I've already talked about that in the course of this video, but I think it's important. The role that people like this play in society is important. They can offend people. Maybe people don't like their material, but you don't have to listen to it. I get the issue with, you know, the whole thing about broadcast TV and, you know, it's public TV wasn't on cable. It was on like a radio station or something. I can understand people getting their undies in a bunch over certain things being shown or, you know, broadcast on the air and the radio medium. I get people's hesitation about certain things that are put on there that maybe people feel like it's not necessarily appropriate time and place for stuff like that. So part of me understands this lawsuit. And then another part of me also understands or feels hesitant about just sort of accepting it, you know, just blindly accepting it, because it feels like it's not clear enough, because people can decide 50 years down the road that a certain word is taboo and shouldn't be said when, let's say, maybe today is perfectly acceptable. Kind of like what's happening with other forms of art, like movies or books and things like that, because we've decided now that certain mindsets aren't accepted. And so there's this sort of kind of like a figurative book burning going on with these things, which I don't support either. So this is not something that I feel. This video has sparked a lot of gray area in my brain, and trying to sort of balance these two things and understanding both sides. I don't know. But that's interesting how the significant role that bit of his played in the legal system. That's fascinating to me. Maybe I'll check out more of their stuff for the channel. If you guys thought this was interesting, maybe I'll do some more reactions to some of their history stuff. I think I'm going to subscribe to them as soon as I quit the recording on this. But yeah, I ended up going on with this much longer than I thought. I was a little bit tired, felt like a little bit brain foggy when I started. Probably haven't made a whole lot of coherent points because I'm feeling conflicted about these two sides. But this was interesting, and I'm glad I took the time to check it out, and I hope you guys find it interesting as well. But right now I don't have anything else to say, so I think I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Later, guys.